Hello, Miss Michelle. How are you doing?
I'm very good. How are you?
Good. And I love you, Eric, my boy.
He says, I love you too, Mama. He's loud and proud and strong today. Very,
All
very
right.
red t-shirt and jeans and hat backwards with a cigarette hanging out of his mouth.
Oh my God, I can just see him. I can just, oops, wrong list. All right, we're going to talk about the most cheerful subject possible, and that is the Jonestown Massacre.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? Do you think we can bring in Jim Jones to help talk?
Yeah, he's here. He's here.
Oh, wow. What does he
He
look
he
like?
he's got very large glasses on, very 70s looking. Um, he's wearing a suit, kind of like I can see like a blue. He doesn't look like a very big man. Um, his energy is big, but his stature looks small. His suit looks like a polyester two-piece navy
Oh,
suit.
oh, he'd be styling, huh? So,
Yeah, he looks like he's and he's showing like his hair is slicked,
oh,
like it's
so
slicked
do you
back.
want any make any opening? Well, thank you for agreeing to come here, and I'll try. I promise we will be respectful of you because it's probably a soul contract like they usually are. But do you have any opening statements, Mr. Jones?
Uh, yes, he's got a very I want to call him like a radio announcer. He's got a very like commanding and powerful tone to him, and he says, "Hello, ma'am," and he says, "I thank you for having me here. I thank your son for inviting me here,"
Okay,
and
who is
he's
making the
pointing to
volume go?
me.
Someone is making the volume go up on my thing. What is that? Mercury and retrograde
That's
or
Eric.
Eric? Eric, stop
That's
it.
Eric.
Making
That's
me
Eric.
deaf before my
Yeah. I told Eric to move back too because I can see something's flickering behind me too. So I don't know if it's a light or something. There's something going on
Something
here.
going on. Well, Mercury in retrograde too. So,
Um.
all right. I'm sorry
Okay.
to interrupt. Go ahead.
Uh. Yes. Big time. No. No. He's wanting to talk about this. He's saying that he's pleased to have the opportunity and he's thanking you for the opportunity to speak. Um, he also is just pointing to me and saying that um, I almost chickened out, that I was kind of veering away from the subject, and he's just pointing to me and saying, like, good for you for talking about this, because he says it's something that we do need to talk about. There's a lot of healing. There's a lot of healing that can come from this conversation. So he's just saying that he appreciates the platform to do so.
Okay, great. Well, actually, let me go ahead and back up and give a background. I got this from this interesting article by Rick Paulus, The Unanswerable Questions of Jonestown. So let's just get, for people who don't know, especially you youngins, God, it's probably like almost,
Yeah,
over 40 years since,
I don't remember it.
oh, I do. 40 years really since it all went down, where 918 members of the People's Temple, a religious cult that originally formed in the 1950s in Indiana before moving to California and ultimately to Guyana, South Africa. 918 members of the People's Temple were left dead, most through willfully drinking cyanide-laced grape-flavored Flavor Aid. It was the final act of notorious leader Jim Jones, who attempted to create his visions of a socialist paradise in that small nation. So why? Did you have a mental illness, for one thing? And if so, what was it?
Mm. He's saying he's calling himself Reverend.
Oh, okay.
So he's got a Reverend. He says that he's looking at nature versus nurture, in saying that his environment when he was a child,
Oh,
his where he came from. He's talking about some of the temperament of people towards him, that he didn't have value in himself, that he didn't truly love himself or appreciate himself, but that he did have, he's talking about having a, he says that it's mental illness. He doesn't want to use that term for it. He's putting it like born from a situation. It was him looking for love. That's where this all started from, that it really was about love that he wasn't able to find in himself, but that it had become very distorted.
well, okay. Tell me about your mother and your father and how they raised you and how they treated you, really.
He's saying that there wasn't a balance, so his parents didn't work together, that there was one, so his mother that was more of the dominant in the family, or
Okay.
had, um, oh, he says she brought home the bacon, as we would term it. She's
Uh-huh.
the one that brought home um,
Made
money
the
for the
living.
family,
Yeah.
earned the living, which wasn't very much. Um, his family didn't have very much. His father, he's calling his father quiet, um, more in the background. I just asked him if there was abuse in his childhood, and he said, um, if we were to look at that time frame, and we would call it abuse now. Um, so yes, it is abuse, but in how he was more ignored. Um, not There was not nurture there, and
Well, I mean,
that
was
there
there,
was.
did they whip you, spank you, beat you? What? And yeah, go ahead.
Yes, he said that there was punishment, that in that form that there was punishment, but he also says some emotional abuse,
Like
and
what?
he's giving. So this is between mother and father,
Oh, okay.
not so much directed at him, he says, but what he witnessed between the two of them, and that there's he's not showing like a foundation, like no foundation there, no foundation for his emotional state, and that he would seek outwards to look for some sort of a connection. And in the community, he was looked upon from others in the community as, he's calling himself the dirty little poor kid.
Oh. Mm.
So he was not valued in society. So he grew as a young man not feeling valued in society.
It's terrible. Did you undergo the abuse of neglect? Like weren't fed for days at a time, weren't bathed or clothed, or went shoeless, anything like that? No, not
He said
chained
that
to a table or
he said that he went without a lot of things, but he still had basics. He had some basics. It was more of, he was given the best that they were able to provide for him. That he still had. Um, we would not term it. If we were to term it right now, it would be like a housing. Uh, Erik says, like in the projects.
okay.
We think about that type of,
Yeah.
how we would look at it. That's how we would term his lifestyle. And that his home, so he had shelter, he had food, but it wasn't plentiful. It wasn't as if, he's showing me like dreams of turkey dinners,
Mm.
like dreams of family gathering, or dreams of that type of environment, that it wasn't in that way. So it wasn't this post book type situation, but at the same time, it was not, there were worse, he says. There were
Okay.
worse.
So we'll wrap up talking about your childhood with this question. Can you share one story that sort of culminates in an explanation of why you grew up to be the man you became?
Because I had not found value in myself. I was looking into humanity. I was looking around me, and I felt that there had to be more.
No, I
I
mean,
I
I'm
had
I'm sorry, I didn't say it right probably, but I want you to tell a story that happened about something that happened in your childhood that explains why you became the man you became. Like one day my mother came home from work and, fed me dog
he's
food,
saying
something like that.
that the particular moment, because there wasn't just one, it was the
Yeah.
injustice in humanity.
Ah,
And he says that particularly segregation,
oh yeah.
um, he had a hard time understanding because he felt segregated as a poor child, and
Yes.
he felt that difference. So when he would see the segregation of um, different colors, skin, particularly, and he's showing, viewing as it from a child's view, viewing people of color not being able to be with white people,
It's
and how
terrible.
that was something that he didn't understand. So he also is saying that he was beyond his time. He was, as a soul, and part of what he had this desire. He had
Yeah.
this desire to join together. He had this desire for unity, and that was something that was very present within him. And he's linking this to what happened as a agreement that occurred out of many probabilities of choices that he could make as he went forward on his path.
Okay. How did, did you have siblings, and how was your relationship with them if you did have them?
He's not identifying any siblings, although I do feel,
But nothing significant in the sibling relationship then, probably.
no, I do feel a male that was in the same age frame as him. So I'm
Okay.
not sure if that's a friend, but he's not identifying any brothers or sisters.
Did you have any black friends?
He says, yes, he did. That there were communities that were nearby him, that there would be places that he could visit. And he's talking about because of the areas that he would frequent, there was places that he could visit that he knew of others. He's
Okay.
not saying that he had deep relationships or anything.
But
Not
did you
until,
play with black kids ever?
yes.
Okay, good. Not that it did you any good. All right, but so tell me the worst thing that ever happened to you as a child.
He's showing me a pond, and him being crouched down by the pond, and there being kids a little older than him whipping rocks at him,
Oh,
pelting him with rocks. He looks to be maybe 9 years old.
oh. Were they kids that had more money from families that had more money?
Yes.
Oh gosh, it's terrible. All right, was the Jonestown well, okay, why? Why the Jonestown? What made you want to do that? I mean, I know that basically you wanted to create a socialist utopia, and I understand now uh, because you were so poor and you saw the injustice of all that, why you wanted to be a socialist. But why did you go that route to have everybody go to Guyana, and and then eventually I want you to explain why you had people drink the Kool-Aid. Well, let's start with the first. Why? Why? What was the big deal about you getting the People's Temple and moving them from Indiana, I think it was, to some place out California and then to Guyana?
Mhm. He says, for myself, and if it's okay, Eric, go back a bit. He said, I can feel some interference, like it's
Uh-oh.
okay. Their energy is getting real tight against me here.
Oh, he wants to give you a hug.
He does. He hugs me all the time, and I love
Oh,
him. Okay. All right. So he says, the for himself, let's look at what the trail of events were that led to it, because there was no light switch that went off to perpetrate what happened in the end. But what led to it was my desire for community, also turned into my feeling of being valued and being loved. And that came within mountains and mountains as people would listen to me preach, listen to me teach. And what started with what was a connection from God, what started of something that I did recognize within myself, then developed and turned into a place in my ego that took a turn, where I became empowered, where I became um, full of the power and the control that started to take over, mixed with addiction.
oh, addiction to what?
And pills,
Okay.
um,
What was your drug of choice?
Vicodin.
Oh, okay. Okay. Was your family religious,
There
by
were
the way?
others too.
Oh,
There were
okay.
others too.
Yeah.
There was some. He's saying yes, there was some value in his home. He's not saying that it was overly religious, but he says that there was value in his home.
Okay.
He's also saying that his what he calls his teachings
Yeah,
went
I want to see.
through.
Yeah, what are the tenets of your teachings? Good.
He says it. If you were to follow my teachings, you would see that when I began, they were about unity. They were about acceptance of all. They were, in fact, he says, very much of what Erik teaches, with love, unity, acceptance. He says
Wow.
what we are all understanding, and he says, and for that there was a great amount of adoration for me.
Mm.
There was a great deal of trust put into me. And so at that time, I was preaching from a place of love, and I was convinced that I was teaching from a place of truth.
So you're Eric's evil twin. Did you believe in God and Jesus?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
we did.
Um,
He said, but he's also saying that his faith, his desire for unity turned into his ideas of control. And then he's talking about paranoia, delusion, his mental state changing over time, his untreated emotional issues, untreated emotional pain that was medicated over many years.
mm.
And he says, when we combine all those things together, the choices that I was making, I had myself convinced that I was making them in saving everyone, in wanting to create a place that could not be touched, because I was convinced that the outer world and all those that did not build this society that I had this vision for, it became less of what God had taught us about unity and being together in this entire world that we have. It became more about a mission that I had, that I was creating this world. I was creating this town. I then became God myself.
Wow.
I was convinced in the egoic way that I became God. And that empowered me. And he's saying that he gained a lot of trust preaching throughout the United States. He gained a lot of trust to those who followed him. And when it was time to, he's calling it the rainforest, when it was time to move to the rainforest, when it was time to move to his promised land, that it was not overly difficult to convince them to come with me. But at that time, he was well on his way to disillusion. By the time he was planning to move everybody, he says, to this location, I was already well out of my mind, so to speak.
Wow. Did the addiction, did the pills cause damage to you, your brain, mentally, anything like that? Or what
Yes,
was it?
he says um, that he was a logical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
He says that he could stay up for long periods of time,
Hmm.
that he could, because he's, okay. He says that they had meetings, they did things at weird hours.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
He
Wait,
said that
before Guyana or after?
he said it was happening before,
Oh, okay,
but
okay.
that it became very intensified when they were in Guyana. That they would um, he started to blend reality, because when he lost touch with the outside world, then it all became his world. And so, medicating himself, he was also using medication with others as well.
Okay. Did you do any hallucinogens?
He's not saying that he's never done them, but
But it wasn't a,
his main,
yeah.
his focus was like pills. He's saying like smuggling pills. He
Yeah.
smuggled pills, or he
Yeah, I was
had
going to ask you how you got them. Okay. How did you get everybody over there to Guyana?
he says most of them came over in groups, that there was um, money, that there was some that were leaving their families,
Mm,
some that were, he's saying, from weakened groups themselves. So they're units that they were leaving, and that they were able to travel in groups, they were able to fly in groups. Um, he's not saying that they all came at the same time,
no. Yeah.
but, but very
But
close to.
most of them must have had some money. I mean, in order to be able to afford to go there, right? So
Uh,
what is that? I
not
mean, what?
all, not
Oh,
all,
okay.
because he said that a lot was left behind for many. Um,
Were most of them rich or middle class or poor? What?
no, he says it was a mixture of all.
Okay. All right. So, what kind of other stuff went on there in the rainforest? Any bad stuff like raping women, or I don't know. I mean, what kind of
He said,
nefarious things happened?
that it did happen, that there were incidents, and he's saying that there were okay, he just wants to say that it didn't start like that.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
it wasn't, and he's also saying that it was very controlled. So because he doesn't want it to, he wants people to understand that it was to those that were there, it was, as time progressed there, it got worse. But there were happy times, because even though his mind was twisted and he was um, feeding his own ego
Mm.
and his own need for control, that those that were there and those that followed, they became sickened with mixing with his ideas, their beliefs, their trust. And Erik is just saying that that is part of why this is so important to speak about these things as well, because it shows the power of the mind and how easily that can be manipulated if we are not
Mm-hmm.
connected with ourselves and understand who we are and face our feelings and responsibilities. But Reverend is saying that there was a community among these people, and there was real love among these people, and
Okay.
that there were many times that they looked upon themselves as the richest people in the universe
Wow.
because of the unity that they were able to create with each other. So he says there is goodness that they did experience. However, the darkness, and so he says he's isolating it, and he's not saying himself that um, he was necessarily doing that. He said that he was abusing them in more of a overworking. He says overworking, punishments. There was like some control. There was a lot of control, but he's not addressing it as being as him being someone that was raping or using it in quite that way.
Well, did you have, well, what kind of punishment did you administer?
If somebody were wanting to leave,
Oh,
he says that was a strike, that was a problem. And so he says there's a space that was created that they would stay in.
like a jail?
He's calling it segregation from the rest of the community.
Okay, why did you not want them to leave if they wanted to?
Didn't want them to infect the rest of the community.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Did you have any weird rituals or ceremonial, I don't know, orgies or I don't know. That's where my mind goes, right? Or sacrifices of animals or anything ceremonial or ritualistic.
He said that there were some encounters that could be viewed in that way, although from their perspective, they would view them as like offering a virgin.
Okay.
But he says he wants to just say as well that it wasn't as much that as it was the um, he just keeps going back to the control and not leaning so much on sex.
Oh, okay. Got it. All right. So, was there any physical punishment?
So they had food, growing their own food, like their own community, and so he's saying that he would work them. Some of them were they had everything taken from them so that they could not leave, and some of them were dependent on medication,
Oh,
some
yeah.
some of it being given very freely, and some of it being given purposely,
Okay.
in the idea that they are being medicated because there's something wrong with them,
Okay.
because there's mental illness with them, or he says, or they wanted to leave,
Yeah.
or they wanted to call home.
What kind of
um
medicine are we talking about? Opiates, barbiturates,
yes,
tranquilizers, and okay.
yes,
All of the
yes,
above, probably. Yeah. Okay.
all of that nature, yes.
Did you father any
He,
children? In the rainforest, basically.
he's saying no. He's saying he adopted, that he had many children.
Okay. Um, did anybody eventually suspect that, man, there's something wrong with this guy's brain in Guyana?
Mhm. Yes.
And
uh he says that they're they were okay, yes, he says. And that when we talk about somebody wanting to leave,
hmm
there have been instances that they would question something or want to take time away, um, but they were so heavily manipulated.
yeah.
He said that it was, had they had okay, um, he says they had been groomed with the innocence and the original connection that brought them all to him, and within that it became like a loyalty, and that loyalty then, was also mixed with some, not all, with medications, with sleep deprivation,
Mm,
um, overworking. He's yes, the vegetables. So like working out all hours, like having to keep working, and there being guards watching them. So like armed guards.
oh,
So
gosh.
it's not like they could just do whatever.
What a
That this
loving
is what,
place. God.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's what it had turned to.
Yeah. Where did they
So
eat meat,
something,
raise animals to eat? I'm sorry.
yeah, there were animals. Yes, there were animals there. Um, he's saying that there were, so he had a relationship with locals, or there was some sort of a, like, people would go out, so there was some that could leave, or there was some like products, animals, things that they were able to get nearby.
Okay. Okay. Uh, all right, so was the Jonestown massacre a sole contract for you?
Yes.
And what was the purpose of that contract?
And he says that the purpose is not just one, for his purpose, his part in it. He says, I had the opportunity to be able to lead. I had the opportunity in life to be able to find myself despite my circumstances. And he says, as I had said before, there were potentials that were at play, and souls that were agreeing to be part of those potentials had I made the decisions I did, which I did. And I had the choices to always turn and understand what I had done before it got too deep. But I didn't make that choice. And so, with that, there were many, and there must have been some that survived as well, because he's saying that there were many that were affected by the tragedy and by this event. And he's saying that it comes in layers. So, survivors and all of the people that it touched,
Yeah.
family.
Well, was the
Um,
oh, go ahead.
sorry, no, what were you going to say?
Was the original contract's purpose, was it to give anything valuable to humanity? Like in Hitler's case, ushering decades of peace?
Well, he says yes, and of course the overall is still the same message that I had started with, which
Oh,
is about unity,
okay.
which
I
is
got you. I
about
see.
being one. Yes.
I got you. You just kind of went off course a little bit. Did you have any negative entities attached to you? Or did any of the members, or most of them, that
That
influenced your behavior?
he said that there was openings. There were yes, he says, and if we were to understand that I was not performing by an entity taking over and doing anything, but I had influences of. Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. So, what made you get to the point where you told everybody, "Come on, drink the Kool-Aid. You're gonna die, and here's why I want you to do it"? I mean, well, first of all, what got you to that point? I mean, you're famous now with that whole, yeah, she's, they drank the Kool-Aid. So,
He said that, he said he yes, he's just nodding his head like he knows that that is a saying. Um, he says that there was a point and it didn't just happen in one point, it's what it led up to, because his teachings had transitioned so much into fear.
yeah.
It went from a place of love and unity to a place of fear and a place of fearing the outside world, a place of um, oh, okay, so he's just giving me a little bit of detail as to how this kind of transition, like what was the turning point. So there were complaints or investigation, US investigation,
Oh, so
or
you felt the pressure.
yes, there was um vis- visiting, or there was like they were coming there or coming to investigate them, take.
Oh,
There was a
yeah.
threat, and he was, the way he described it to them is he's saying, letting them know that they're going to take everything away from us. So
So, yeah.
everyone felt like they were going to be like their everything that they have is going to be taken away, and he had them broken down to a point where they felt that that was everything that they had, that anything
Oh,
else would
yeah.
not be okay.
So he
It
said,
was
drink
just the
this
way that the
Kool-Aid
mind
and
is.
you will go to a magical paradise, or was there anything like that? Any lure instead of just fear?
Yes, he had said that that this was like a them exiting first, like them going
Ah,
to the next place,
okay.
having to
So,
leave
yeah.
to the next place to avoid what was going to transpire, like their utopia was being taken away.
So go to another utopia pretty much. Did everybody drink the Kool-Aid, or did some of them have to be killed?
He's saying that like shots fired, so some were shot. um he's also showing a staggering, so it's not like they all took it all at once, so it was
Oh,
like a staggering of groups, or
oh, I see. I see. Okay. Ooh, I'd be scared if I was the second group. Oh my God.
but he says it was all that it was um that the way that they died was they died with each other, that there was no he says it doesn't have the same fear that we are feeling hearing the
Yeah.
story.
Did they suffer when they died?
He says no, that it was
So quick, yeah.
falling asleep.
All right, so where did you get all that cyanide? I guess smuggled, right?
Yeah, like somebody that made something. There's some place that makes it.
Oh,
He's
okay.
showing like it coming from somewhere,
On
like
in Guyana, I guess.
he's saying no,
Okay, it's
not
not
in
then.
Guyana.
It's
Yeah.
not important. Okay, there's conflicting evidence about how you died, Reverend Jones. If you shot yourself or if you had one of your followers do it.
He shot himself.
Okay. Also, why are there at least 30 edits to the audio of the massacre that the FBI concludes had to be deliberately made? I saw that in this article too. What was erased and why?
So bits and pieces of the story that he didn't want to have heard. So were these tapes made like I'm not sure what the context is, but like he's saying that they didn't know the full story of what was going on. So whoever the tapes were intended for.
I don't know. I'll read this in the article. Despite the mountain that McGehee and Moore, a married couple, who he was supposed to go there, I think, and didn't.
Okay.
So lucky him. Uh, Despite the mountain that McGehee and Moore have declassified, there's a specific group of 200 pages that McGehee is particularly keen to get his hands on. The FBI, in its refusal notices, claimed the documents had been withheld under the privacy exemption, wherein the release of a document would constitute a clearly unwarranted invasion of personal privacy, which led McGehee to believe the pages were a part of a diary of someone at Jonestown. And one claimed that this guy is a public figure. He was at a public event. And that was McGee's way of saying, yeah, it's a public event, so I got a right from the
There's
Freedom of
people
Information
still
Act.
alive. He says there's people still alive that have information on there, so there's protection.
So that's the only reason? Or was there a monkey business going on with the government that had to be covered up?
No, he's not saying that it's in that way. He's not saying that it's something like he's moving away from it being something like a conspiracy or anything being hidden, and that it being connected to something about living people, about information of something that
Okay.
happened there that affects their personal freedom.
Okay. So it was basically just that. So this person also goes on to say, was the Jonestown massacre in any way connected to the infamous CIA mind control program known as MK Ultra, since the lands Jones bought were used right before he acquired it?
He's a bit silent on it, but I will say, okay, hold on. So there's some connection there, but it's not directly to him. It's not something that he did purposely, but there is some sort of
CIA connection. Well, these
yeah, there's
next two
yeah.
questions may help. Well, what was the real reason CIA branch chief Richard Dwyer was with the congressman and media during that visit, posing as a State Department official. Why was he really there, and what was his role in it? I don't know what congressman he's talking about because it doesn't say, but
The congressman is dead.
okay.
He says that he was killed.
Okay. But why was the CIA branch chief, Richard Dwyer, there with the congressman and the media? I guess maybe it was, when things were
He's
going
saying
down.
that he was saying that it was he was invited there. That it was
Oh, okay.
he's saying that it was like a let's show you what this is, that it's not what you think it is.
Ah, I see. But why CIA?
Investigating whether it was a cult, like
Oh, okay.
investigating what was going on.
Okay. So nothing more than that.
Um,
Was
he's saying that like it's had something to do with the following his trail that he left through the United States.
Oh, I see. Okay. Now was
That there was
Tim
more to it.
okay. Was Tim Carter, and apparently he's both a victim and a survivor, involved in any way in the design or the carrying out of this tragedy, in spite of losing his own wife and son, but was a high-ranking lieutenant of Jim Jones? So what's going on with with Tim Carter? He lost his own wife and son.
He said no, that he wasn't. Was he was away, or
He
he
was in,
was he was off the property. He wasn't on the
oh,
property during the massacre.
oh, okay. Um, well, but he was a high-ranking lieutenant of Jim Jones, right? So did he help carry? So he didn't help carry out the tragedy or design it or anything. He wasn't even a part of it.
He keeps saying that he's innocent, like
Oh, okay, that's
in
fine.
so he's not. So whether he's giving me the feeling like he was part of what was happening, like he was like that Jones was acting more on himself,
Okay,
convincing those around him.
I got you. Okay, this person also says, were there more murders than suicides, or vice versa?
Uh, well, he says that there were it would be murder because many of them were children.
Oh no.
So
Well,
he's
I
saying
mean,
that we would call, but he's just addressing, saying I understand what your question is, um, and there were less murders than suicide.
oh, okay. All right. So people were watching this going down. When they were seeing people drop like flies, what were they doing? What were they thinking? Was there panic? I mean, what was it like?
Hugging,
No screaming. I'm sure crying, but
crying, crying.
was there panic at
Um,
all? Any panic?
in some a little bit, but he's calling it a controlled situation.
Oh, okay. Wow. So they ultimately say that 918 died. Is that accurate?
He says, "Yes, ma'am."
Okay. One of the biggest, most improbable questions left unanswered, and perhaps a contributing factor to why so many people are primed to believe there must be some conspiracy at work, is how Jones manipulated his followers. Every day, Jones read the day's news over the settlement's loudspeaker, and sometimes he would make stuff up as he would go along. Like in one instance, trying to stifle thoughts of escape in the minds of his African-American contingent, he would claim the U.S. government was putting black people in concentration camp. There's no question there, but here's the question. How did Jim Jones's affiliation with the Disciples of Church denomination enable him to get away with what he did? I mean, you know?
Ask that question again.
How did the disciple, he was affiliated with the Disciples of Christ denomination. Mm-hmm. How did they let him do what he did? Like take all those people to Guyana. And they didn't have any control over the suicides.
No, but it was because like when he was showing us the, he's calling it a graduation. It was gradual. Okay. So this was, he says that he was very good at what he did. He was very good at it. He was very believable, and what he had techniques that he says when you involve the belief, there was loyalty there. What he was doing as things got more intense, he says that the manipulation, he's calling it amped up, that it was not as grandeur as it was in North America.
Yeah. All right, we only have 4 minutes left.
Like under the radar.
Let's just do some a lightning round here. What were you here to learn? Because, I don't want to go over time for you, Michelle, but what were you here to learn in this incarnation? Just real quick.
He says self-love.
I knew it. What were you here to teach?
Yeah.
If anything.
Self-discernment.
Okay. Do you have any regrets? Seemed like you would have a few.
He says as the human soul, yes.
Yeah, of course.
Understanding the capacity of it, yes. He says as a spiritual being, I did exactly what was needed to do.
Okay. What kind of insight did you first have when you transitioned?
He said that there was no totality of what he did, that he's calling himself being embraced he's calling it a loving space, being embraced in a loving space, but he was not with all the other souls.
Why?
That he was not. He said that the souls, that it had to do with his belief system and about him believing that he was better than.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
At a higher consciousness. So he says that transitioning, he was given that human belief system and was worked through that in his process of healing. He says leaving that human essence is what he's calling it.
Yeah, it takes a little while for the humanness to wear off sometimes. Can you share anything new about yourself that not too many people or maybe nobody knows? Like, oh, you like to wear different colored socks, or like Marie Callender, I almost said, Madame Curie sewed some little teddy bear on the inside of her skirts. So do you have anything fun or secret, or it doesn't have to be fun?
He says he used to like to give like little gifts, and he also says that he had nicknames. He had names for people.
Okay, well, people know that. What do people? Oh, well, maybe the general public doesn't know. Anything that nobody knows?
Okay. Something that nobody knows. Okay. Okay. I don't know if this might be influenced by Erik.
Oh God.
But
you know what that means.
He said that he says, shall I answer whether I was boxers or briefs?
Yeah, go ahead. That's fine.
Says I was briefs. He goes, I
Okay.
had some boxers, but I preferred the briefs.
All right. Good to know. Very briefly, is there a past life or another life, future or past, that you can share that most influenced your one as Reverend Jones?
He's just showing another life and this looks like Egypt. And he's just saying that he had experienced some of the challenges of, he's talking about the hierarchy
Oh,
in
yeah.
Egypt and
Yeah.
experienced some of that, and he had a desire for power.
Oh, so he was low ranking.
Yes.
I got you. All right. So, Erik, do you want to ask any questions? Michelle, do you want to ask any questions?
Erik just says he would like to congratulate him on his excellent, um, he's pointing at the boxers and briefs.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. I thought
And
I was going to say, I
seriously,
want to
that's what
congratulate
question.
him on making such excellent flavors of Kool-Aid or something. Oh, God.
Okay. Erik, it just wants to point out, he says, um, it wasn't Kool-Aid. Okay, so they just say it wasn't Kool-Aid.
No, no, it was something else, like
It was
Flavor
that
Aid.
it
Yeah.
was some it was like it was a powder and water. It was something
Okay.
like Tang or something like
Oh,
that. But
okay.
yeah, no, Erik said that he did a fine job. He says, so did you, Mom.
Oh, and you did too, Michelle. You're a brave girl. So, when you met your victims, just real briefly, and then we'll close. How did that go? A little awkward?
He says, upon the time that we had union, there was a great deal of healing and understanding.
Oh, good. All right. Well, thank you, guys. Thank you, Reverend Jones, for coming up and telling your side of the story. I think it's important for if all the people are to heal that were somehow touched by this tragedy. And thank you, Michelle. You're awesome. You guys can check her out at dash art.com. I'll put it right here. And I love you, Erik. I love you, Michelle.
Love you, Lisa.
Until next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, Pete.